Let's see how long I can get through this video without referencing Willow Smith's song. Oh crap, I already did. So how does Shantae even use her head so much? For those of you who are unaware, Shantae's main method of attack is shaking her head so hard, her hair whips her enemies to death. So how does she do this? Well, long story short, it's magic. She's a half genie. She can do whatever she wants.
But wait! It can't be magic because when she loses her genie powers in Risky's revenge, she can still do it.
Some of you Shantae fans may be saying, and that statement is very true. But in that scene of Risky's revenge, she only lost her genie powers. There is more general magic in the world not tied to being a genie. This whipping ability could still very well be her own magic. But I think finding out if it's possible for a normal human without genie powers to do this is how we'll find the answer here. Is this only possible with magic, or is Shantae just really good at giving head? So first, we should look at how wheel whips work. It takes a strong and dexterous hand to master whip cracking, but once you get it down, you can make that signature cracking sound every time. Indiana Jones style. That cracking sound is made by breaking the sound barrier. Master bullwhippers can sometimes move the tips of the whip more than twice the speed of sound. Whenever anything moves faster than sound, it creates a sonic boom. Most famously, high-velocity jets and Guile from Street Fighter create the best sonic booms. Whips do this too, just on a much smaller scale. That extreme speed on the end of the whip is why they hurt so much. It tears the skin and sometimes even the flesh underneath. This is why whips were used so much for medieval torture and punishment. But don't worry about the horses and cows you see getting whipped all the time. Often, the whip isn't hitting them hard enough to hurt more than a good flick, and most of the time it doesn't even hit them at all. It's just used to create the sound right above their heads as a signal to speed up. Back to the analysis though. When a bullwhipper starts to whip, the whole whip is moving at a certain velocity. Then, as the motion continues, the back end of the whip stops moving and the curl of the whip propels forward. That beginning momentum in the loop becomes concentrated into a smaller and smaller space as it moves up the whip. And by the time that momentum reaches the tip, it's been multiplied by quite a bit, and the thinner the tip, the faster it can move. Now, in Shantae's case, she doesn't make a cracking sound with her hair whip, just a little swoosh. Listen. Which is similar to whip swooshes. So she isn't breaking any sound barrier with her hair, but her hair is still moving fast enough to cause harm to her enemies. So without magic, how would she do this? First of all, the haircut would be very important, but it looks like she's got that down. An extra long ponytail that is thinnest at its tip, rather than the same thickness throughout. Secondly, you may think this is silly because hair isn't whips, but the thing is, it is. Whips, especially older ones, were often made with a combination of leather and horsehair. Heck, horses already use their tails to whip away flies. Granted, they don't even come near breaking the sound barrier when they do. In fact, some people have actually recycled their own hair and made human hair whips. Though, these aren't as effective as traditional leather whips, because the hair can't form that curl quite as well, and thus can't push all of that momentum into its tip as easily. So in order to actually whip with your hair, it would need to be stiffer more towards the base, like leather. Basically, you would need a lot of hair product. A lot. But the consistency of hair being able to form a whip is only one issue. The much bigger one is the motion needed to use whips precisely. As I mentioned, using a whip takes a lot of dexterity, a good balance, and movement with the entire arm and hand. So doing these motions with your neck sounds, well, painful to say the least. Referencing that terrible song again, if you watch the dancers in the video, none of them are actually whipping their hair in the traditional whipping sense. They are mostly just twirling it around very quickly. And they occasionally headbang. Both of these methods get your hair as far out as can be, and can still be used to whack a few people you don't want too near you. Also, this method will only strain your neck after prolonged use, so it's a lot safer for your vertebrae than actually using your hair as a whip. But it doesn't deliver the whip force we're looking for. In order to do that, we need the head to move with proper form. A form similar to that of an arm, cracking a whip. As you can see here, the motions used to properly use a whip involves a smooth, round motion that speeds up as it continues, and then comes to a sudden stop with a downwards flick. The motion of the arm itself doesn't seem too fast until that end bit. At least not as fast as it would take to break your neck or anything. Until, that is, you consider the length of the whip. Most whips that are capable of cracking or coming near cracking, thus causing the most damage to whatever it hits, are between 8 and 10 feet, though there are also 6 and 12 foot ones as well. The longer ones are more capable of actually cracking, and this is because of the way whips work, that momentum has more time to build up and concentrate the longer the whip is. Though the overall mass of the whip can slow it down, which is why you can't just make them infinitely long. Unless you're this guy. That's crazy. So now we'll look at Shantae's hair, which varies in length depending on the art you're looking at, and depending on which game you're looking at. So let's look at when it's shortest, as that will be the hardest to whip. Looking at the original Shantae, we get a good look of her backside, which shows the tip of her hair right at hip level. Assuming she is a woman of average height, meaning 5'4" or 1.63 meters, this means the part of her hair that she can whip with should be approximately 2'7" or 0.79 meters. Now, it is possible to crack a whip of 6 feet, and even as low as 4 feet, but it takes a lot more buildup and starting speed to do so. In order to get that tip to still crack, it takes a lot more initial force. Going back to Shantae, she can't crack her hair whip, likely because of how short it is. It is far too difficult to get that tip to break the sound barrier, though it is possible that it comes close. But working with a whip made entirely of hair is hard enough. Now make it 2'7", and you've got yourself a challenge. The only way to get a whip of this length to cause any damage beyond knocking over your grandmother's urn is to apply additional force to an even greater extent. It is still possible to get a 3-foot whip to crack as seen here. But you see how much more initial speed and force is needed compared to this 6-foot one? Also, it should be noted that the way whips are measured plays a role here as well. A 6-foot whip could very well actually be 8 feet, as seen here in this chart. The areas in red are the only ones measured to tell you how long the whip is. The whips I've been showing you are all the common bullwhip, and in bullwhip measurements, you completely ignore the end bit, which is a huge factor in the whip's power. Since after all, that's the part that actually does the cracking, does the hitting, and applies the force to Granny's urn. This 3-foot bullwhip could very well come closer to 4 feet when you include everything, so Shantae would have to apply even more force than this to achieve her whipped hair attack. And with her neck. It's called whiplash for a reason. Your spine and neck are made up of smaller bones called vertebrae. Between each vertebrae, you have discs that absorb shock, but they can only take so much. Your neck is very dense with nerves and muscles, your esophagus and arteries, meaning it's not only very important, but very prone to injury. Whiplash is a condition you get from your head whipping back and forth too quickly. Sound familiar? Most commonly, it applies to people in car accidents, but it has also occurred to those riding roller coasters, or football players playing football, or spending too long headbanging at a metal concert. Whiplash can make you feel dizzy and cause your limbs to go numb. It can also create long-term back and shoulder pain if not treated early enough. And this pain can be permanent, lifelong. If you watch headbangers, at least the professional ones, most of them are responsible with their banging, slowing down a bit before changing directions as to not give themselves whiplash. Headbangers have caused their brains to bruise and even bleed. They've caused themselves to pass out and, yes, even die. But more commonly, they've given themselves plenty of whiplash. And they are doing nothing compared to what Shantae is. She's putting her whole body into it, and constantly jerking and whipping that head on purpose, as hard as possible. Just strong enough so that her hair may not break the sound barrier, but does cause serious harm. Not only to people of flesh, but even fully armored knights and bricks, which basically points right back to her using magic. Non-genie related magic, that is. Magic to both protect her neck and her brain, and to make her hair hard and fast enough to do all these crazy things. Shantae is awesome. And so are you, and so are your vertebrae, so headbang responsibly. Protect your neck, protect your noggin. Thanks for watching. Let's see how long I can get through this video without referencing Willow Smith's song. Oh crap, I already did. So how does Shantae even use her head so much? For those of you who are unaware, but I think finding out if it's possible for a normal human without genie powers to do this is how we'll find the answer here. Is this only possible with magic, or is Shantae just really good at giving head? Shantae's main method of attack is shaking her head so hard, her hair whips her enemies to death. So how does she do this? Well, long story short, it's magic. She's a half genie, she can do it true. But in that scene of Risky's Revenge, she only lost her genie powers. There is more general magic in the world not tied to being a genie. This whipping ability could still very well be her own magic, whatever she wants.
But wait! It can't be magic because when she loses her genie powers in Risky's Revenge, she can still do it.
Some of you Shantae fans may be saying, and that statement is very